dazzling one, and this week I'm covering the Cestui Que Vie Trust, which I'm very thankful that a subscriber mentioned it because this is vital information for everyone. So I recommend that you check down in the description box for the links of previous videos done on this subject matter, because while I'm going to do my best to cover this in detail, I am not even going to begin to scratch the surface of this elusive topic. So definitely check it out because it's essential to know. But Cestui Que Vie itself means term of life or years, which is the foundation of this conspiracy. And its tentacles stretch all the way back to the year 1302 with Pope Boniface VII, which this guy even changed the style of the Vatican from wearing scarves on their heads to wearing a pine cone shaped crown, which I'm probably sure you can guess that it has some kind of link to some ancient deity, which it does, and that is to Baal, as well as the cult of Cybele and fertility. Cybele was considered the mother goddess of nature worshipped throughout the Hellenistic world, which hence this is where we get the term Mother Nature. Her early worship included orgiastic ceremonies in which her frenzied male worshippers were led to castrate themselves, following which they became Galli, or eunuch priest of the goddess, which right there just sounds very painful for men. And Cybele eventually came to be viewed as the mother of all gods and the mistress of all life. So according to mythology, this story is pretty messed up and violent. Cybele was in love with a shepherd by the name of Attis, but of course Attis wasn't faithful to her, so Cybele, as a form of revenge, drove him crazy, and because he was insane, he castrated himself, and this introduced death into the world. But of course, Cybele brought him back to life and also brought nature back to life, representative of rebirth. So as you can see, Boniface had some interesting ties to the occult already. But what gets even more interesting is when he gets into these trusts. So he wasn't the first to come up with the ideal because he was inspired by the Knights of Templar. And of course, the Knights of Templar were always entrusted with other people's possessions, and this is how they accumulated their wealth, becoming the bankers of today. And so he understood that the ideal behind a trust was we own you and we claim ownership over the land. And so his first step is when he established under the first crown Unum Sanctum. It was an express trust boiled down to control of all of Earth's properties, giving them a deed to it, except for a couple of square miles in London, in which the Knights of Templar own, as well as Washington, D.C. and the Vatican. Who would have guessed? So in 1455, there was the Testamentary Trust under Pope Nicholas V, or the real estate, and then there was 1481, the Attorney Regus Pope Sixtus Regus Crown Trust, which this one created when a child is born, being the sale of the birth certificate as a bond to the private central bank of the nation, depriving them of ownership of their flesh and condemning them to perpetual servitude as a Roman person or slave. So that sounds pretty pessimistic, doesn't it? And it sounds misanthropic, but unfortunately in 21st century America there is a striking parallel, and that's the most daunting thing about it. So in the year 1531 there was the Convocation Trust, which with this one in 1537 by Paul III through the papal bull Convocation, also meant to open the Council of Trent, being the third and final testamentary deed and will of the Testamentary Trust, being the trust set up for the claiming of all lost souls lost to the sea, which the reason they use this lingo is because they were under maritime or admiralty law when it was about ships, trade, and commerce. So another factor that plays into all of this is the crown was lost in 1815 due to the deliberate bankruptcy of England and granted to the Temple Bar, which became known as the Crown Bar, or simply the Crown. The Bar Association have been responsible ever since in administering the reaping of the souls of the lost and damned, including the registration and collection of baptismal certificates representing the souls collected by the Vatican and stored in its vaults. So clearly with this Cestui Que Vie, you can see that there is a linkage to the representation of souls. All of what Boniface started all the way down comprise the Cestui Que Vie trusts, which are controlled by the Vatican, which can be boiled down to Roman sorcery. This allowed constructive trusts to be created, which demand you retire at the age of 70, well, by the age of 70, because you're not expected to live that much longer. And the first version was enacted under Henry VIII of England in Parliament in the year 1540, which brought about a great deal of corruption. In 1666, so right there, triple sixes, mark of the beast, Cestui Que Vie Act, or Proof of Life Act, was established by Westminster and the ruling classes. There are various sections of it that explain different laws, and like I said, I have the links provided in the description box so you can take a look. Under this act, it was believed each individual, male and female, was declared dead or lost at sea, since at the time, once again, under maritime or admiralty law. So, this gets into the birth certificate, which, this is some pretty wild stuff here. So, you might be wondering, how did something from ancient Rome make it all the way to 21st century America, right? Well, it really starts with the birth certificate and with the Federal Reserve. In the year 1913, the U.S. created the Federal Reserve Act, which basically established a private central bank that would regulate the amount of money the U.S. government was allowed to borrow and put in circulation. However, because of World War I, the United States economy was suffering, and they got into the Depression, and under FDR, by the year 1933, the country was bankrupt. That same year, gold became outlawed, and the U.S. became mortgaged and held in trust. And this is pretty much its transformation into a corporation. And with this came the ideal of people becoming collateral for the U.S. debt. So, if you take a look at your birth certificate, then you'll notice that you have your name at the top in bold letters or in all capital letters. But even before that, when you're born, you're considered a John Doe if you're a male, or a Jane Doe if you're a female. And when your parents register you with a birth certificate to show proof of your existence, you are considered Cestui Que. Now, with these all-cap letters, it is synonymous with legal entity, fiction, company, or corporation. What is interesting about this is that the capital letters also are similar to when you look at a headstone at a grave of someone dead. Remember, under maritime law, under the Cestui Que Vie, we are considered dead or lost at sea, and even on your birth certificate, the day you're born, pretty much the day you're considered dead as soon as it's signed with your name printed in bold letters. And you're signed as a bond, a trust, an entity of fiction, pretty much, part of the corporation, which corporation has the word corpse in it. So that's also when your straw man's born, as some may call it, and this new class of persons or debtors, slaves, and everything to do with this trust every day you work. So if you look at your birth certificate, then you'll notice these red letters, which are serial numbers with a letter in front of it. And this is your bond tracking number, which legally a bond is a written evidence of debt issued by a company with the terms of payment spelled out. Every citizen is given a number, and each live birth is valued at $650,000 to $750,000 Federal Reserve dollars in collateral from the Fed. That is a lot of money that most people will never see. And your tracking number is between 7 and 9 digits long, and as I said earlier, it has a letter in front of it. And the reason for this is the Federal Reserve has 12 regions, and they also have letters, like E is for Virginia, and so forth. So your birth certificate represents the regional bank of the Federal Reserve that holds your bond. A birth certificate is able to be monotonized and then generates taxes and wealth over its lifetime, and in this way repays the collateral that the Uncle Sam borrowed from the Federal Reserve. It also floats around in New York Stock Exchange, making you an asset. And you very well by now, considering the amount of years you've been alive, could be worth billions. See, it goes back to the idea that America is a corporation. Crazy, right? So, some symbolism with this Cestui Que Vie Trust. When you look at this from the aspect of us being commerce or cargo and being related to a ship sails the waters and it reaches the dock where it has to register, right? Because it has commerce. When a baby is brought into the world, they go through their mother's birth canal, through her water, and just like the ship that goes to the dock, the baby is registered by the doctor. And of course, the baby is born, or there's the birth, and the ship also has its birth. And birth, in this sense, B-E-R-T-H, means a ship's allotted place at a wharf or dock. So it also has its certificate issued as well. So it's interesting that there's this relation to maritime law, a ship, us being commerce and being registered, and a ship moves by a current just as we are able to move by currency. Another way to put this is many people are empty vessels floating on the sea of commerce. It's crazy, isn't it? So when you look at it from the aspect of court, it gets even more complicated. So we are under a UCC law, or Uniform Commercial Code. Sadly enough, crime is commercial. A criminal case is not about justice, it's about money. The court is set up in a very interesting way. It's representative of a religious gathering. The court uses Latin. The Roman Empire ruled the Vatican using Latin. Witches and sorcerers also use Latin. What is interesting about this and tying courts in is that judges wear long black robes. When you look at satanic masses, you see long black robes, but also it's representative of the Saturn death cult. Now, some may say, wait a minute, the logical explanation, just look at basic history, trace it back to the honoring of the death of the monarch in the 17th century of the funeral of Queen Mary in 1694, or they'll say it was linked to Charles II in 1685. But still, it's kind of strange, especially when I give you a little bit more of the weird, maybe coincidences. Also, judges, they summon you. And what do necromancers do to the dead? They summon them. Remember, you're dead because you're considered dead and lost at sea, aren't you? Also, demons are summoned. Another interesting thing, there's the writ, and also in the Catholic Church there's the writ. Most courts operate under trust law, which is borrowed from ecclesiastical law, which goes back to the Catholic Church. So courts want you to use this lingo when you're on trial as a criminal in a criminal case, to admit you're an entity to be manipulated, thus without legal title over one's soul. A man or woman may be legally denied a right to stand as a person, but may be treated as a creature or thing without legally possessing a soul. Hence, why the Bar Association, remember, the Bar Association was associated with reaping, and also a lawyer has to take the bar exam to even get into law school, is able to legally enforce maritime law against men and women because they can be treated as things, cargo, that do not possess a soul. Isn't this crazy that this whole thing with the birth certificate and Cestui Que Vie Trust turns people into cargo or commerce meant to be monotonized on? It's crazy, isn't it? But in terms of this court stuff, so the trust in a trial has three parts. A person taken into court is the beneficiary. Your birth certificate is nothing more than a title of a trust. The judge in the court, who is basically an administrator, asks for the person's name. If you give them your name, the one on your birth certificate, then you're allowing the judge or administrator and prosecutor to swap roles with you as the beneficiary. Keep in mind this is interesting. Pro se means to walk in. Cuter means one's skin. That means a prosecutor is identity thief. They are stealing your identity like a skinwalker or a demon that possesses someone. Once again, think back to the summoning. The clerk, also another thing that's interesting about that, is also representative of a cleric. But also the clerk is the trustee. The prosecutor is the executor, and the prosecutor has the liability. They create the summons to a hearing. But once you admit to being the beneficiary to the trust, then the executor becomes the beneficiary and you become the executor, and you execute your own sentence. If you don't identify with the trust, then the executor has to pay as they have bought the proceeding to claim. So what's sad about this is that there are people who claim, now it's not sad that they claim this, but they claim that there are ways to get around a criminal trial if you understand the Cestui Que Vie Trust rules and everything. And here's some of the advice. But it's sad for those who don't know this. I've never tried it before, so I can't say for certain it works, but there are people who said that it has. So here's the advice. If you're involved in a criminal trial, which I hope you're not, and you don't even have to go to court in the first place, they ask for your name. Don't directly state it because it's in all caps on your birth certificate, meaning you're dead, according to it. Speak of yourself in third person and reply in such a way as, are you asking for the CQV trust of your name? Insert. Answer questions with questions. State what you know about you being the beneficiary. If you answer, you've already lost and switched positions if you answer with your name. And you are now the trustee of your own trust, which makes no sense. And you're now subject to the fate they give you, which means be put in jail because trustees are subject to the beneficiary. So when you answer with your legal name because it's written in all capital letters and what it denotes, then you've already lost. So this is why you have to talk about yourself and mention your trust in third person. Also, remind the judge they are the administrator in a way such as, are you the appointed trustee or clerk of this case? Are you not? Since they are the trustee to the plaintiffs, state, and so on. And according to this theory, for those who have recommended it, judges will usually drop the case if they see there is nothing to be made out of you because, once again, court is not about justice, it's about money. And move on, or if they are very adamant, maybe try you in common court. So all of this is very, like I said, vital information to understand and know. And like I said, it's just wild how all of this, once again, go back to the ideal of those in power seeing people as nothing more than a way to make money, as commerce, as dead. Basically calling someone dead when they're born. And also just, once again, worship of death, glorification of it, worship of the sea, worship of money. Satan is the prince of this world. In 2 Corinthians 4:4 it says, in whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. So as you can see, Satan is the prince of this world. So of course, he has his pawn set up in power, and they do everything they can to oppress common everyday people. And this is one of the ways they do it, by basically making fun of us, mocking us as dead and soulless beings, and making money off of our backs as we work. So this is, like I said, very important information to know. I hope that I broke it down and summed it up in a way that was understandable and not confusing, because it took me like 20 times reading the same documents over and over to really grasp this concept. And so, like I said, I definitely encourage all of you to continue to research and look at more of this stuff, because this is important stuff to understand and know. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and take care, have a wonderful week, and Yahweh bless you.